What's up, Triaders? Melodic Triad Nation. Good to see you guys. Thanks for coming to hang. Jack, it's your birthday. Happy birthday, man. A Triad present. Okay, let me think about that for a minute. I didn't have any presents planned, but I'll see if I can think of something cool. While I'm thinking, if anybody has any questions, drop them in the chat box. Let me know. Once I get tuned up, take a sip of coffee. We'll jump right in. Nick, what's up, man? Robert, great to see you. Miguel, hey. Miles, awesome. I feel like it's a little darker than normal. So I don't see any questions yet. So I will think about something cool to bring up for you, Jack. Here's something. I've been playing with our bebop scale idea quite a bit. Rob, what's up? Good to see you. Paul, Ben, awesome. I've been playing with our 6, 9, and 12 note bebop scales a good bit, just kind of tinkering a little bit. I really have actually been a little bit too busy recently. I haven't been like actually practicing. I've just been tinkering a little bit. But I've been playing with mixing and matching the numbers. So it's not straight up 6 notes back, 9 notes back, 12 notes. Robert, do you have any suggestions for playing over a quick turnaround? That's a little bit of a generalized question. Maybe you could, is there a particular chord progression you're asking about, like a 1-6-2-5, or just dig a little bit deeper into your question, and then I'll come back to it in a second. Unless you're just looking for something very general, and then you can let me know that. Jack, I've been playing around with this idea, and I've shared it. I've talked about it a bit in the past with you guys of mixing and matching. So, if you think of the 6-note scale as one passing tone, right? Triad passing, triad passing, triad passing. That gives us 6 notes. The 9 note is triad passing, passing, triad passing, passing. It's 2 passing notes. That gives us 9 notes. The 12 note bebop scale is 3 passing notes. Triad passing, 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 triad passing, 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 triad passing, passing, passing. That gives us a 12 note version. So I've been mixing and matching them a lot. What I've started to find is that the 6 and the 12 note go well together really well. You can play them as 8th notes or 16th notes. The 9 note can work in there, but because it's an odd number, ideally you would want to either phrase it as a triplet or as like a 8th, 16th, 16th. So I haven't been spending too much time mixing that one in. I've been mainly doing the 6 and the 12 note scales combined, meaning that sometimes I use 1 passing note, sometimes I use 3. And what I discovered is I've been like playing around with different orders of these things. And what I discovered is that the Barry Harris 6 diminished scale is this. It's 1 passing note, 1 passing note, 1 passing note, 3 passing notes. 6 note, 6 note, 6 note, 12 note. But that's not the only grouping order we could do this in. Obviously, that one's very special because it highlights the 6th of the scale and it gives us that 6th chord and the diminished chord moving back and forth. But we could do instead of 6-6-12 or 1-1-3, we could call it. We could do 3-1-3. Okay, so 3-1-3, and then let's just put that on repeat. 3-1-3, 3-1-3, 3-1-3, 3-1-3, 3-1-3, 3-1-3-3. I don't have these like drilled into my muscle memory yet. I'm trying to decide if I want to like come up with every combination possibles of ones and threes and write them all down and start working through them, or just find one that I think sounds really cool. But it's effectively the 12 note version for this particular one. The 12 note version, the 6 note version, the 12 note version, the 6 note version, the 12 note version. It's a fun little game I've been playing. The 9 note scale can squeeze in there a little bit, sort of, but it's a little quirkier. You have to kind of change the rhythm up. This works. You can just play like these long flowing 8th note, 16th note lines without having to worry about triplets or, you know, changing the duration of any of the individual notes. It's been a fun little game that I think you'll dig. All right, let's check in and see if Robert came back at me. I don't see a follow-up. Oh, there it is. Cool. David, what's up? Mike, hey. Like at the end of Miss Jones, obviously hitting the triad will work, and flat 9 on the dominant. Anything else? So there's kind of two basic approaches that we can think about. Let me go ahead and pin this. Sorry, I always forget to pin these questions so you guys can see them. Quick turnarounds. It's a great thing to work on, and outside of practicing tunes, I think practicing 2-5-1s is extremely important. 2-5-1-6s also, especially. If you're practicing a 2-5-1-6, you're also kind of practicing a 1-6-2-5, right? It's just like if it's on loop, it's the same chord progression: 2-5-1-6, 1-6-2-5, 6-2-5-1. Like they're all the same. It's just a treadmill, you know. So wherever you jump on the treadmill, it's going to move in the same manner. That one chord is the fraternal twin to the 3 chord. So if you can play over a 2-5-1-6, you can play over a 1-6-2-5. You can play over a 6-2-5-1. You can also change out that one chord. So, you know, if we're doing this in the key of C major, 2-5-1-6 would be D minor, G7, C6, A7, D minor, G7, C6, A7. Again, we could start on any order of these, not any order, any individual chord. The order is always the same. That C chord, we could treat it as a sort of first inversion and effectively get E minor instead of C. So now we have D minor, G7, E, A, D, 2, 5, 3, 6, 2, 5. Does that make sense? So one of the many, many, many reasons that I love 2-5-1s and 2-5-1-6s so much, and turnarounds you could call them, is because there's so many different ways that just by practicing this one thing that it can unravel into quite a number of very, very practical, useful things. And then applying them to tunes is extremely important. There's kind of 2 generic ways that we can think about playing over this stuff. And it's not totally black and white. We can combine them and mix them and match them. But one way is to think every chord. So each chord has a triad and or a quadratonic. Okay. That's one way. And I think it's extremely helpful and important to learn that stuff. That allows us to play the changes instead of kind of hovering above them. We're actually inside of them. The second way is to hover above them, is to condense it all down. Okay. And this might mean condensing it all down to one triad, one quadratonic, which I'll give a couple of examples. Or it might mean just condensing, let's say, the 2 and the 5 chord down to just the 5 chord and just thinking only about the dominant. Okay. When things start getting faster, I encourage all of you to practice to get your one chord at a time, where you're hitting a triad and a quadratonic for every chord. I encourage all of you to continue practicing that to get your tempo up in terms of how fast you can play and keep up with that type of playing. But it also becomes more and more necessary to simplify down how many triads and quadratonics we're using. That's just the reality of, life. So I'll do this kind of slow because there's no sense in going too fast and making it difficult for you to hear where I'm at. Actually, let me do I'll do a 1-6-2-5. Okay, because that'll act more like the turnaround at the end of a tune. We don't often see a 2-5-1-6 at the end of the tune unless the tune starts on the 2 chord, because the 2-5-1-6, its whole purpose is to get us to the 2 chord. But usually the turnaround, like in Miss Jones, that tune starts on the 1, so we want something that's going to bring us to the 1. In fact, I'll go ahead and play a 3-6-2-5. Okay. Oh. Okay, so E minor, I'm going to play as a C triad tension 2. Okay. A major or A7, A major tension flat 2, D minor tension 2, G tension flat 2. It's the same quadratonics I would use for 2-5-1-6. Right, that's the vibe you get when you're playing one triad, one quadratonic per chord. Again, as it gets faster, that gets harder. So the what's the right word I'm looking for? The extreme example of this is to go all the way down to one triad. Okay, one triad, one quadratonic. For this, even though I'm not playing a single C major chord, this is E minor, A7, D minor, G7. It's all in the tonal center of C major. It's headed towards C major. So I'm going to start with a C major triad, C tension 2. That's just the quadratonic. I'm not using our 6-note scale or 9 or 12 note. Okay, I'm not using any other tension notes right now, just C tension 2. This is enough to get phrases happening. I forget who it was. Was it you, David? Somebody was telling me that they heard Peter Bernstein say to play one melody over 4 chords, which is another way of explaining what I'm talking about here. I'm just trying to give a little bit more of like a specific starting point for how to play that melody. The C major triad is the stable notes. The tension 2 is the tension note. Yeah, David, awesome. So this is extremely helpful. Okay, we're not playing the changes. We're not inside the changes at all. We're just using the tonal center to kind of hover above the changes in a very harmonically respectful way, but emphasizing that tension 2 note to get us some phrases. Okay, so we're not stuck inside of noodling in a scale. We don't need riffs. We're not outlining anything at all, but it still works. The next step, we could add some other tension notes, right? We could add tension 4 or tension 6. So now I'm kind of thinking of this sort of like our 6-note melodic triad bebop scale, but I'm not playing it as a scale. I'm thinking of it as 3 different quadratonics. So now I have 3 different tension notes. So here's tension 2 again. Tension 4. Okay, tension 6. Okay. The other thing that's worth doing is the C minor triad. Again, now we have like very little to do with the harmony itself. We're in the tonal center of C major, but we're not playing a C major chord, and we're not even playing a C major triad. We're playing C minor. That gives us our blue triad, and that will give you the ability to play those sort of kind of like Grant Green, Wes Montgomery kinds of sounds over the changes without worrying about the changes and just getting that really kind of hip, lyrical, bluesy sound. Again, tension 2, 4 with the sharp 4 extension, and 6. Okay. So that's one way to go to the extreme end, right? So you have either playing every chord, like one triad, one quadratonic per chord, or one triad, one quadratonic for the entire progression. I think they're both worth practicing. Obviously, the single triad is going to be significantly easier to keep up with because if the tune's very fast, that's fine. You have 2 measures to get through most turnarounds. The other option is to kind of mix and match the two a little bit. So you could kind of think about, let's say the C major triad for the whole turnaround until you get to the dominant chord, G7. And then maybe you want to really hit that G7 because you're about to go back to the top. So you're like outside the chords, you're not worrying about outlining anything. And then you get to the big old fat dominant and you want to let the listener know melodically, hey, here comes the top. So you could do that by switching from that C triad, that C tension 2. Right, so I can hit that one other triad, so I'm like condensing things down and then move into another triad to express functional movement and ideas. D minor, G tension 2, flat 2, sorry, C major, C major, C major, G flat 2. Okay. So now we're kind of mixing and matching the two. It's not really a third approach. It's just mixing and matching the two basics, right? One being to hit every chord, one being to play on top of the chords. You could think of it as playing through the chords versus playing above the chords. They're both great. And at faster tempos, it becomes harder and harder to play through the chords because you have to really keep up with it. If you're struggling to keep up with it, but you want to, I would say just get the tension note out of the mix and just play ideas just with pure triads. That can be enough when you're just trying to hit a progression and let the ear know that you're inside the progression. Okay? Just don't arpeggiate it. Focus your time on the half note game. That'll help you voice lead through the changes. Hope that helps. Let me know if I left any confusion in there. All right. Let me know if anyone else has any questions. You're welcome, Robert. New grounding problem. So I was just counting it up, Jack. This is that 3-1-3, three passing notes, one passing note, three passing notes that I pointed out a minute ago. That's like from our system, like kind of combining the 6, 9, and 12 note melodic triad bebop scales, but how it's kind of similar to Barry's thing. This ends up being a 10 note bebop scale now. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 octave. I mean, I don't really think it matters that much, but it's just interesting when you start mixing and matching these. We have our 6 note and our 12 note, but then you can also get basically any number in between those two by mixing and matching, depending on how many you are using. Ben, could you explain the difference between using pure triads versus arpeggiating? Yeah, it's a great question. So an arpeggio is when you play a chord one note at a time. That's like kind of the simplest definition of what it means to play an arpeggio. You are arpeggiating a chord. You could arpeggiate a triad. An arpeggio just means you take a harmonic structure, a vertical structure, and you move up or down it, right? I live in an apartment building. An arpeggio would be like going into the stairwell and just starting from the first floor and walking to the top, and or starting at the top floor and walking all the way down, okay? You could apply that concept, that technique to a triad. A triad is just 3 notes. So if you were to play those 3 notes, 1, 3, 5, 5, 3, 1, right? Or 3, 5, 1, 1, 5, 3, any combination of playing them in ascending and or descending order, right, consecutively, would be an arpeggio. So there is really no, one is a structure, like a triad is a set of notes, it's a structure. An arpeggio I would think of an arpeggio as more of just a technique. Okay, it's an intellectual idea that you could apply to any number of structures. You could apply it to a triad, you could apply it to a 7th chord, you could apply it to a major 7 sharp 11 sharp 9 chord. An arpeggio is just a way of bringing into existence some type of harmonic structure. When I talk about improvisation using triads instead of arpeggios, what I'm trying to help people break away from is to stop thinking about this and to start thinking about this. Okay. So yes, you could walk up and down the stairwell in my apartment building, but you're not going anywhere. Right? There's a coffee shop right next door with really good coffee. You will never get to that coffee shop if all you do is walk up and down. Walking up and down will help you get to know the structure of this building that I'm in, but it won't take you anywhere. It won't give you an interesting day. Okay. If a family or friend came to visit me, I would never do that, except maybe to get out of the building and then to come back. But the only reason for that would be to get to the main floor so we could leave and then start walking this way. So when I talk about triads versus arpeggios, I don't intend to mean that it's a triad or an arpeggio. What I'm trying to express is that triads, because they're so simple, offer us the easiest way to start moving this way instead of this way. We can still arpeggiate a triad. That's why I'm always trying to warn people, like, don't get stuck just arpeggiating the triad. So for example, using the chord progression I was just playing a minute ago, C major, A7, D minor, G7. So if we think in terms of arpeggiating these as 7th chords, it's a lot of notes to keep up with. It's 4 notes, 4 chords. That's 16 different possible floors within this structure. If we just bring it down to 3 notes, now it's a little bit simpler, okay? Because that's 25% of the picture is now gone. So voice leading through the triads allows us to begin moving that way, which is what develops most great melody. Okay, we could open the real book, open the Omni book, flip open most tunes, even Charlie Parker tunes, and there will be some arpeggios in there, but it's not as many as we are led to believe. Okay. So a much better practice is something like our half note game. If I'm playing C major, A7, I'll do a 1-6-2-5. C major, A7, D minor, G7. I'm never just running up and down. I might enter in on, well, I'm entering in on one floor, taking the stairwell to the next floor, and then moving sideways to the next triad. I'm not ever doing. Not that it's not sort of worth pressing that a little bit, but that's okay. I would strongly recommend, unless you're totally struggling because you can't see visually the positions, I would not recommend you spend much time at all doing. That's arpeggiating a triad, right? Okay. That's kind of what I'm trying to get at when I discuss the difference between triads, phrases, quadratonics, voice leading versus arpeggios. Arpeggios are, a neat trick. They're a nice effect at the right time, but they're not going to help. They're not going to help you develop beautiful lyrical phrases that will carry you through the changes. They're just like a little ornamentation you can throw in from time to time. Let me know if that makes sense. Robert, could you go over the Barry Harris concept again and maybe play it over a progression to see how it applies? Sure. Awesome, Ben. So the Barry Harris concept, first things first, I don't have a PhD in Barry's system. I met him twice. I've learned a little bit directly from him and a little bit from other people. I was nowhere near prepared to learn his system when I met him and tried to understand it. I wasn't far enough along the path for it to truly make sense, although it was very eye-opening. So the basics of his system is that he has this thing called the 6 diminished scale. It's essentially, let's say, a C major scale, okay? But he adds one extra note to it, and that note is the sharp 5 or the flat 6th. So C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 octave. He adds this note into it. It's like the leading tone to the 6th of the scale. Okay, it's a chromatic passing note between the 5 and the 6. G, G sharp, A, B, C. Now this is a scale, and we could theoretically improvise with it, but from what I've heard from other people who have studied quite extensively with him, he doesn't really talk too much about direct application of this scale to improvisation. It can be used to improvise. It's a bebop scale, and it's a nice sounding scale. From what I understand, he has like a whole other way of thinking that he talks about a lot when he's expressing improvisational ideas, or expressed, improvisational ideas to his students. And it had to do with like, are you starting on a chord tone? Are you not starting on a chord tone? Are you starting on a strong beat? Are you starting on a weak beat? Here's how many half steps chromatic you need to add in. Like there was like a whole thing, and it felt a little bit too much for me when I was learning it. I like to keep things as simple as possible. I could see the concept, the simplicity of the concept, but the application felt like there was just too many different ways to go about it before you could just get to improvisation. The scale is really more of a harmonic device. Okay, from the best I understand it. Again, I'm not, a certified Barry Harris teacher. So when you take this scale that he has with this extra note, and you do the 1, 3, 5, 7, chord building out of it, you end up with just 2 chords. That's it. No matter what scale degree you start on, every scale degree gives you either an inversion of C6 or an inversion of D diminished. Everything. Okay, it's just a series of C6, D diminished, C6, D diminished, C6, D diminished, C6, D diminished, C6. Which is a pretty neat effect. I mean, it's essentially the 7th chord version of what I'm always harping on, which is tension, resolution, tension, resolution. He literally has a tonic chord, and its most intense diminished chord, which is also sort of a cool inversion of, like, you could think of it as a G7 flat 9, right? It's a rootless G7 flat 9. So it's tonic and dominant or tonic and diminished, kind of the same thing. So then he, expands upon that in terms of what you can do in terms of creating movement, creating harmonic flow. It sort of falls into our diminished chord movement studies. Okay, I try and talk about the different ways diminished chords can move. He's found a way to sort of fuse diminished with diatonic, so that the whole thing is. Okay, that was a bunch of Barry Harris stuff, followed by like a 6/2, and then when I got to the 5, I went back to the Barry Harris stuff to imply the resolution. So that is a lot to do with where he's coming from. It's sort of a harmonic look at the application of scalar thinking. Like, he's taking the scale and turning it into harmony and then moving through it. Again, like I played a minute ago, you could improvise with this scale. It's just a C major scale with a sharp 5. That's it. So what ends up happening is you get a C6 chord where there's one passing note in between every chord tone, 1, 3, 5, and 6. Okay. It happens to overlap with our 6 and 12 note melodic tri-bebop scales, especially when you put them together in a certain way, which is what I was pointing out to Jack, because he and I have chatted about that stuff quite a bit in the past. Let me know if that makes sense. The Barry Harris method is obscenely logical and brilliant, but it doesn't always make sense at the beginning. Sometimes it can seem really complicated out front. It's effectively a scale with one extra note, and when we add that extra note and then arpeggiate it each scale tone out, instead of 1, 3, 5, 7, like getting C major 7, D minor 7, E minor 7, F major 7, G7, A minor 7, B F diminished 7, C major 7. Those are the 7 diatonic chords of a C major scale. When you do the Barry Harris version, the 6 diminished, instead of getting 7 diatonic chords, you get 8 chords, because now it's an 8-note scale. 4 of those chords are inversions of C6, and 4 of those chords are inversions of D diminished. It's like ridiculously perfect and beautiful. That's the gist of it. It works really well on piano. The piano players I've heard who use it, like it, just hearing them talk about it, apparently it works beautifully on piano. I find it a little bit much on guitar. Obviously, like Pasquale, for those of you who listen to him, like, he's obviously found a way to get that stuff happening on the fretboard, and it's just like insane. For me, I find that triads just sit a little bit easier. I don't feel like I have to, bench press 500 pounds to get that stuff to happen on the fretboard, and it gives a similar effect of tension, resolution, tension, resolution, tension, resolution. Robert, it makes sense. I don't think I've hit the section that talks about the bebop scales yet. I'll get there sooner or later. Yeah, I don't talk about it at the beginning. They're totally unnecessary. They're fun. They're neat. But I could play music. Any of us can play music just with pure triads and primary quadratonics, just literally four note structures. We could improvise the rest of our lives and never feel trapped or like we're not touching bebop, because once you can improvise these four note structures, if you add in leading tones like C major tension 2, right? If you were to add the leading tone into this, you have 8 notes at your disposal. That's as many notes as a bebop scale has. Now, the notes are going to function a little bit differently, but you have B, C, C sharp, D, D sharp, E, right? F sharp, G. You can start playing bebop phrases just with that. We're not even adding full-blown chromaticism in yet, right? This is just 1-3-5 with one tension note and then allowing for leading tones. Once you add in chromatic passing notes that can connect these different triad and quadratonic notes, now you have all 12 notes at your disposal. So there's really very little that you can't express in terms of advanced bebop and modern jazz vocabulary. Okay, and we have the blues built into this with the sharp 2 extension. So we've got very simple pop-like lyrical accessible melody with the triad, just the pure quadratonic. We have the blues accessible and we have bebop accessible in a four note structure. That's what I meant a minute ago when I was talking about Barry's system. From what I was taught in terms of improvisation, seemed very complicated. Like you needed to have the scale down, then you needed to be able to keep track of which beat you were starting on. Was it a downbeat? Was it an upbeat, a strong beat, a weak beat? You needed to know where your chord tones were. And then depending on where you started and when you started, you either needed to add 1, 3, 5, or 7 chromatic passing notes, or 0, 2, 4, or 6. Like it all made sense and it came up with really beautiful lines. But in terms of being able to do it spontaneously in the moment, seemed seemed like you needed to spend years, if not a decade, shedding all those different ideas just to get it to the point where you can begin playing music. The quadratonic, most of us can get somewhat comfortable with it enough to start improvising with it. I think you once told me that within like 2 weeks of joining the group, you noticed you were improvising little phrases, like you were letting go of riffs and scales. That's kind of what I'm after. Like, how do we get it happening quick? And then in a way where it kind of becomes like this secret formula that we can just continue growing with it. So a month or 2 later, you'll notice that your phrases are getting cooler. 3 or 4 months later, you notice that you have the blues showing up in your phrases. 6 months later, you notice you just have like bebop ideas flowing out of you. To me, that's like, if we can figure out a way to get started quickly and then to grow pretty much, without too much hassle, like consistently grow, that's kind of like the perfect approach for me, because I don't want to wait 10 years to start playing. Awesome. So the bebop skills, unnecessary but fun. When you get to them, you'll get to them. By the time you get to them, hopefully you'll know your triads, your triad shapes, and where those particular tension notes are well enough that you'll just kind of be able to see the bebop scale. Like it'll take a little bit of practice, but it won't be super insane. Who is this genius who lives in a little white room somewhere in the city? I mean, New York City, we're all renters of tiny white rooms, so I think there's any number of them. Thank you, Kirk. Miles, personal choice here. Using the quadratonic with the tension note sounds less mechanical to me than the bebop scale, especially the nine note. Yeah, the bebop scales can be very mechanical because you're now kind of back stuck inside of a scale again. And in some ways, it's almost worse because at least when you're stuck inside of a traditional seven note scale, you can play it in any rhythm you want. As soon as you start playing, especially the nine note scale, now we're like not only stuck in a scale, but we kind of have to play it in a particular order and with particular rhythms. So yeah, it can be very mechanical. Um, a good way to think about it, Miles, and like I said to Robert a minute ago, like we don't need the bebop scale, so by all means, like don't even worry about it. But for those of you who do like it, because it is neat, I like it. Don't think of the scales as the music makers themselves. Think of them as ways to train yourself to feel different rhythms, different ways rhythmically and pitch wise to connect different triad notes. Right. So you have the six note version will connect two triad notes with one passing note. You have the nine note version. Now you have two passing notes, right? The 12 note scale gives you three passing notes. So when you start to think about it that way in these little like building blocks, these little cellular structures, okay, now we can, if we can get to that point where we can let go of the whole position and just start feeling these rhythms and how they connect different notes, it can start to gradually, if it's anything, if your journey is anything like mine, it will gradually help you discover a greater sense of rhythmic freedom where you can kind of feel where that downbeat's coming, see the triad note that you're trying to get to, and sort of dance rhythmically through it in a way where you have a little, I don't want to say more freedom, but it just helps give a little more clarity to how many notes you're going to play, which notes are the sort of more perfect notes, and to ensure that we're landing on the right note at the right moment, if that makes sense. It's totally not necessary as long as you can see the quadratonic and kind of dance around inside of it. You'll find those things, but the bebop scales I've found a fun way to give us kind of more options that rhythmically line up really nicely, if that makes sense. Sorry to dominate the conversation. Not at all, man. But did you just mention sharp two for the blues scale? So far, I've only seen minor triad with 2/4, sharp four, and six. The sharp two is an extension. Okay. Sorry, let me go ahead and pin this. So there are different mini rules when we're dealing with the minor triad. The rule for the blues is if you have tension four, this counts for basic, simple root structure triads as well as upper structure triads. If you're using a minor triad with tension four, you can add the sharp four extension, and you'll already sound bluesy because minor triads with the tension four just sound bluesy, but that sharp four will add that really dense, like intense bluesy quality. So, for example, here's a G7 chord with a D minor triad on top. Okay, it already sounds bluesy. That would be a G9 tonality, right? G7 in the left hand, D minor in the right hand. It's not our primary tension note, but tension four works in this triad, in this quadratonic, this tonality. The four of D minor is G. So I'm adding the root note of this G7, but you're not going to hear it as a stable root note. You're going to hear it as that bluesy tension four. Right? Even down low in the lowest register, it still feels like it's tension four. And the D note should feel like melodic, like the home bass melody. If I wanted to, I could add the sharp four extension, which is G sharp. It's now the flat nine. So that's a sort of rule that governs a quick little hack for creating the sound of the blues against a minor triad. The way it works with a major triad is that if you're playing a major triad with a natural attention natural two, not a flat two, natural two, you can add the sharp two extension. Okay, so for C6. That's the sharp two extension. Okay, it can go up to the major third, it can go down to the natural two. Right, it's like adding the minor third into the chord also. It's not full-blown replacing the major triad with the minor triad, but it's hinting at it. Yeah, and there's some other little blues tricks as well, but those two are extremely helpful because they're very common quadratonics that we'll see. Again, you can use this when you're not playing the blues, when you're just playing a basic standard. You can use this when you're in the upper structure. Here's C major 7, sharp 5. So it's like an E major triad over C major 7. The blue note here is the natural fifth. So I'm playing over C major 7. I'm playing the major third, the sharp 11, the sharp 5, the major 7. But I'm also now adding in the natural 5. But it just sounds like a bluesy note. Why? Because it's the sharp 2 extension of our tension 2 against a major triad. Howard, what's up, man? How do you practice quadratonics over fast changing chords? Do we concentrate on voice leading between the chords? That's a great question. And that was the very first question that I was asked today, specifically in relation to a turnaround. So since we're nearing the end, I'm going to go ahead and skip this question, at least until I check in and make sure everyone else's questions are answered. And then you can always watch it on the replay. In fact, I don't know how it works live. You might be able to just rewind it to the beginning right now and watch it. So check that out. If I have time, I'll come back and answer that. Chris, what's up, man? Just stopped by for a brief moment at work. Oh, cool. Awesome. Miles, flat 2, sharp 4 blues. Minor wise. I'm not sure where the flat 2, what you mean by that, but I don't think I agree. Sharp, they're all sharps. Sharp 2 extension, sharp 4 extension. I also happen to notice kind of recently that the sharp 6 extension works also. So basically all of the notes that work in our basic scales, the tension 2, 4, and 6, whether it's major or minor, we have tension 2, 4, and 6. We also have the leading tone to all of those, right? So the tension 2, you could play the flat 2 as a leading tone. Like I was saying a minute ago, I think it was to Robert, we were talking about if you just get the basic quadratonic down, it's not really 4 notes. As soon as you add leading tones in, it's 8 notes. And then as soon as you add in all of our chromaticism, it's all 12 notes. But if you were to add in these bluesy extensions, it's not 4 notes or 8 notes. It's 12 notes also. But now it's not just pure chromaticism. It's stable notes, intense leading tones, and then bluesy extensions. I actually didn't really notice that until just now. But right, C minor tension 4, sharp 4. That's tension 6. It looks like the flat 7 of a scale. It is, but if you think of it as an extension of the 6, now we have all these little pockets inside of our scale that just our immediate access to bluesy sounds. Whether we're playing the blues or not really doesn't matter. Like here's a D minor triad over G7 again. That's the 6 with the sharp 6 sharp 6 extension. That one is not in the program anywhere, Rob. I just started tinkering around with this like a week or two ago. I kind of noticed that I was playing over the blues a bunch at that point, and I noticed I kept trilling on this one sound, and I was like, oh, that's interesting. It's the 6 and the sharp 6. And so I just kept poking at it. Like, I wonder if I put it in the upper structure, what happens if I put it over a major triad instead of a minor triad? What happens if I, just exploring that in all these different ways to see, is this a 10 commandments type thing? Like, is this a rule that just works? Or is this just like, oh, it works in this situation? So far, I think it works in every situation, including major and minor triads. So I could play in the key of C major, like that turnaround. Was it you? I think you were the one that was asking about it. We can now play over a major key turnaround and add the quote unquote flat 7 into it melodically, and it won't sound wrong. It'll just sound like the blues. All right, here's that 3-6-2-5 in C major. C major triad, tension 2. There's tension 4. There's tension 6. Did you hear it? Does it sound wrong? Or does it just sound bluesy? That's a B flat note in the key of C major. I'm playing it over an E minor, E half diminished, an A7, a D minor, and a G7. But it just sounds like a bluesy note. There's our 12-note bebop scale. Okay. That one, again, I kind of just started tinkering around with that one recently. Effectively, I'm moving between if you needed to, if a college student, someone still trapped in the industrial jazz complex were to transcribe this, they would see me using a C major scale. They would see me using Barry Harris's scale. They would see me using C Ionian. They would see me using C Mixolydian, because I'm using the sharp 6 extension is the flat 7. So I was playing Mixolydian. I was also playing the blue triad, which gives us effectively Dorian. So they're seeing me using all these different sounds. I'm not constantly thinking about Dorian versus Mixolydian versus Ionian versus Barry Harris versus any of this stuff. Like, I'm just looking at the C triad, major triad, and playing these different tension notes. And occasionally I was dropping into the blue triad C minor, because I've spent enough time in both that they kind of feel like the same thing to me. It's just a matter of which one I want to express at that moment. So yeah, something to think about, something to mess with. Miles, sharp 2, sorry, fat fingers. Yeah, no worries, man. I assume that's what you meant, but I just wanted to double check. The flat 2 is a great sound too, but it doesn't really, I was going to say it doesn't really work, but I kind of wonder if you could make it like a sharp 1 extension. I don't know if it works for every note, but all of these bluesy extensions, in case people didn't notice, are a half step above an important note. You can trill on it, you can land on it and resolve back, you can do all kinds of funky stuff. So I wonder if the sharp 1 works. Let's find out. Kind of don't think it's going to, but it seems to work best for these tension notes. I don't know that it's going to work for a resolved triad. It's actually not as bad as I was expecting it to be. I think it would be better if you did it with the natural tube. It's not half bad. I don't love it. I don't hate it. Yeah, we just have a couple minutes left, Howard. I don't know that I have enough time to go back over the answer, but if you haven't already, definitely go back. It was the very first question. Essentially, there's two different ways to think about it. One is to just practice playing every chord and try and get faster and faster at it. And the best way to do that is probably to get rid of the tension notes and just focus on pure triad voice leading first, like spend a lot of time in the half note game. The other side, the other extreme would be to just think about one triad over the whole progression. So if you're playing in the key in this vamp, this is a 3-6-2-5 E minor, A7, D minor, G7, E minor, A7, D minor, G7. It's in the key of C, so I can just think C. Okay, I'm not playing the changes. I'm not inside the changes at all. I'm playing above the changes, right? We can play inside them, which requires that we use more than one triad, or we can play above them, which is kind of like a simplified version of it. There's other triads that could be used, but the root structure, tonic triad is a great starting point because that's in a lot of ways kind of where our art form came from, is very bluesy music, Broadway show tunes, dance music, things that were not overly complicated. If you can learn to make melody with those ideas first, then we can talk about more excessively complicated triad options, upper structure triads, things like that. That's my recommended starting point, and a quick summary of what I said an hour ago. So you can go back and watch the full version then. Anybody else need anything? We got a minute left or so. Everybody good? Awesome. In that case, we will call it a day. Thanks for hanging. Thanks for the great questions. Trying to think if there's any announcements. Awesome, Howard. Robert, you're welcome, man. Killer. I have not. Oh, here's an announcement. I have not been very active in Facebook. In fact, I've been almost completely missing. I will be back in the near future. I've been seeing the videos that everyone's sharing, and I love it. Like, it's awesome. Everyone's sounding great. I've been working on a sort of like freebie masterclass that is pretty extensive. I'm trying to take what I did in December. For those of you who were with us for that big like week long 7-day thing, I've been trying to take that and condense it down to like a 30-minute to 1 hour video. So it's just been taking up a lot of my mental space and my time. But I am checking out the videos. Everyone sounds great. Love seeing all the interaction. Feel free to continue posting, and I will definitely be back on there in the nearish future once I kind of get my life back in order with this video. I did upload a new lesson for the new study group members, the study group 2.0 members. I uploaded that last night. There's a new tune coming. We're going to stick with bebop a little bit longer. For those of you who've been with the perm for a while and were around to know about Forms for Life, we're working on bebop right now, specifically Charlie Parker. So we're going to be kind of sticking with that for a little bit longer. We're going to take some of the ideas from Forms for Life and put them into our tune studies. We're going to do rhythm changes and bird blues because those are so important to our tradition, to bebop. And then we're going to shift gears and kind of look at some other ideas, some comping, some shell voicings. I am still planning on doing a Cherokee deep dive, which I will upload certainly into the tune studies, and I'll probably put it into the Forms for Life program for those of you who had access to that. So that's still there and coming. There was just a couple of other big projects that kind of got me sidetracked, but it's on the way. If anybody needs anything, let me know. Mike, take care, man. Ben, great to see you. Paul, thanks for hanging. Happy pratzing, everybody. We'll talk again soon.